Guys, we're gonna go over Hart versus Scarlett and Hart versus Hyun from WCS America Season 3 Finals. Basically, is all about Hart's builds, but also his control. We're just gonna go through some of his build orders and what allowed him to win, right? Because it has a little bit more to do with Terran being OP, mostly because for some strange reason you can't do the same build every single game as Terran and win. I don't know what OP is supposed to mean, but we just win anyway, right? So the first game we're going to look at is Scarlett versus Hart from the first quarterfinal. Hart won this series, spoiler alert, 3-1. And we're just going to go through everything here because his build was pretty solid. I'm going to write down the general gist of the build notes. There's not really a lot to be added as we go through this, but it's going to be very standard things: 10 depot, 12 racks, 12 gas. Yeah, he opens Reaper this game. So my dog was watching SC2 for the first time. He pointed out your crap is something he enjoyed the smell of very much. What? I'm recording. Okay, well that's one people will be able to see in the future. So Hart. Now the build order, yeah, 3-0. Yeah, it was 3-0. Now the build order that Hart went for is very similar to a build that you've seen me do on my stream, right? It's a very powerful attack with medevacs, about 6 to 8 Marines, and a lot of Hellions. The difference between my build and the one that Hart does in this game is mostly about the second gas that he gets. So we're going to keep our eyes on this, right? He builds 1 Reaper. He does get his command center, so we'll take note of that, right? Single Reaper, command center before second depot, and we'll say reactor after Reaper. We're gonna keep just really clean notes of everything. I try to keep them simple so that you can all follow. The notes will be posted on the YouTube VOD below, which will be available a little bit later, and of course I'll send them out to all my Twitch subs afterwards. Oh god, this is a sick, there's some sick memeing going on in the chat. So as you can see, Hart's Reaper, it doesn't really do anything crazy, right? We look at this from his vision a little bit. He's kind of checking around, but there's nothing much for this Reaper to do. Now, things get interesting very soon because Hart's build 2 Marines. He's going to go up to 4 Marines. So say 4 Marines from barracks while factory is building. And we'll say factory ASAP for the when you build it, as far as the build order goes. So the factory finishes, boom, starport immediately build starport when factory is done. Swap fact plus barracks ASAP. So these are all standard things, but we're just gonna label them out. Oh, what's this? So we're gonna start second gas as you swap. And so what else is there really to look at about this, right? Scarlett's build isn't anything crazy. We don't really care about what she's doing because our build order is pretty aggressive. So we're going to try to make the best of this situation no matter what happens. If our opponent's going roaches, we'll find a way to deal damage. If our opponent is going mutas, we're going to try to kill them before they get mutalisks out. But in general, tiny things to note: Hart will keep Marines on the edge of his base. This is pretty standard if you've ever watched me play. You'll note that one thing I love to do is put 2 Marines on patrol at the edge of the base. This basically makes it so that this Overlord that Scarlett has, yeah, it might eventually suicide itself, but it has to suicide. And if Hart's lucky enough, maybe he can kill Scarlett's Overlord before she can see. As of course you can see, Scarlett has this Overlord queued to go over here. This Overlord can't get across without being spotted by the command center. So Hart's build is wrapped up pretty tightly. And he's going to go straight into Marine production. Note that he does not get a tech lab, so we'll say build Hellions, build Marines, no tech lab. We want Marines as fast as we possibly can. By having the Marines out as fast as possible, it gives us a little bit more oomph when the medevac comes out, right? It makes our build stronger. So looking here, I guess I should keep this on Hart's vision. Looking here, Hart shoos the Overload away. Scarlett's like, well, I can't really get in there. I've already lost 25% of the hit points on this. Another thing that Hart will do, you'll notice, he does immediately saturate these 3 gas. So 3 gas on the second refinery immediately starts a medevac. So Medevac ASAP. And just continuing to build Marines and Hellions because the focus of this push is to kill very early on. But one thing to note is Hart's gas. He's at 80, he's closing to 100 gas. Nothing else here is really weird. Nothing in this build is unusual so far compared to a normal Marine Hellion attack, except the second gas, which will allow Hart, as he continues to build Hellions, boom, armory, right? So you start your armory after the medevac. So we'll say armory at 100 gas after you start the first medevac. Now the armory isn't what we're gonna wait for. We're not waiting for the armory to make our attack. In this instance, in this game, Hart does something very, very specific. He has his Hellions out on the map so he can see if there's any forces coming his way so that he can defend. But most importantly, what we're gonna see him do this game is load 7 Marines in the medevac. So push out when medevac finishes. Load with Marines. So the medevac's loaded up. And in this game, Hart's going to do something pretty ballsy. He's going to pull 5 SCVs. Pull 5 or so SCVs depending on size of your balls. If you have, if you've got tiny ones that, some of us do, it's okay. But if, if you're one of us that have big balls, you can pull SCVs and go ham and try to kill the guy. Now, it's also important to note that as Hart pushes out, he pushes out with the Hellions, his Reaper, the medevac. All this is really good, but there's something that makes this build really strong compared to your average push, and it's that Hart gets this, he continues to rally Hellions down the map, and he also rallies another medevac across the map. He also takes some of the SCVs he pulled came off gas because he knows that his build is mostly focused on minerals. So we'll say on our notes that Hart, rally Hellions across map as you push the front. So Hart moves in now, and as we can see, he drops the Marines in front. He doesn't do anything fancy. He's right in the front. And the whole point of this is just get in and try to deal as much damage as possible. It's not really a harass build. This build has invested a lot. You'll note Hart has no 3rd command center. There's no engineering base. Stim is not even on the way. So Hart doesn't have anything this game that actually gives him the power to kill. He doesn't have anything here that would actually give him the ability to play out a mid-late game position, and that makes things really, really difficult if this attack doesn't do a lot of damage. So moving forward, Hart's going to turn his Hellions into Hellbats as soon as he arrives. So we'll say transform as armory finishes. And then Hart just attacks. Now the cool thing about the SCVs is that SCVs are capable of repairing Hellbats even as Hellbats are being healed by the medevacs. You'll notice, see, this Hellbat's getting double heal, which is pretty imba, right? It's pretty awesome. Most people don't get to use this because pulling SCVs versus Zerg is, in general, a bad idea. If Scarlett had a Baneling Nest to defend against this, it would have done significantly less damage. I don't want to turn the sound on just in case it overrides my microphone, but you'll see that the power of a Hellbat being healed by a medevac and SCVs is not really killable by roaches, so Hart gets a lot of kills at this point. He's killed, oh my goodness, 14 drones, which is pretty sick. And then you still have the loaded, I don't know exactly what shotgun this would be. Maybe some sort of old pump action. No, that's not old at all. Well, anyway, you basically have a double barrel shotgun. And these Hellbat drops can be used to pick off drones left and right now. Behind all of this, Hart's going to go and get a bunch of extra production. This part isn't really as important looking forward because, of course, Scarlett, all she can really do is build drones and just try to claw her way ahead. But Hart won't build a 3rd command center this game at all because he recognizes that he has a really big opportunity to just kill Scarlett once Stim is done. Scarlett's been slowed down significantly. As you can see, her upgrades are late. Even though Hart doesn't get any upgrades, he gets a very late +1 attack. Even though he gets a late upgrade, he's done enough damage to Scarlett that she can't have upgrades herself. That's like the trade-off. And she also has no tech. The Spire's going to finish very late. The Corruptors that she gets are like not really consequential for this game. All that really matters is that Hart gets out and then he pretty much just wins the game within the next, what was it, like 5 or so minutes. It wasn't anything crazy. Yeah. Tanks are never a bad follow-up to aggressive pushes, mostly because when you go for aggressive pushes with siege tanks like this in the mid game, it's because you didn't have stim very early on. So Hart gets these tanks because he doesn't have stim, and if you don't have stim or tanks, you can't really defend against a roach all in. But bringing them for the later fight wasn't necessarily bad. But at this point, yeah, Scarlett's toast, man. There's nothing that she can really do to stop this. Like, she has a good number of roaches and banelings, but baneling speed's not done yet, and she's not making any drones. I wanted to believe that there was something that she could do at this point in the game, but Hart is really good with his marine control, and as you can see, most of these marines never get touched by banelings, so that's something that comes down to your skill, because if it was me trying to do this push, maybe I hit 30 seconds later, baneling speed is done, and then everything gets mopped up. But that's one of the reasons why Hart is so good. If he makes this push any later, baneling speed is done. You try to go up this ramp, and then you get smashed, right? If you're trying to think about, as someone in the chat asks, can you talk about what Scarlett should have done to hold this? Realistically speaking, Scarlett probably wasn't expecting the SCVs to be brought in that earlier attack. Otherwise, her roaches were enough to stop the push. She had everything necessary. She droned pretty heavily during all this. Maybe she grabbed too much tech. She got her 1-1 upgrade. She got the +1 for the Mutalisk, which I think was a huge waste of money. That could have been 4 more banelings to help break this, or getting a few extra zerglings out earlier. Baneling speed definitely should have been the #1 priority upgrade for all of this, because that was what would have allowed her to hold on to this next attack. And even then, sometimes it's hard to compete with a Terran player that is really good micro, who's really good at keeping all their shit alive, right, to say the least. So that's what allows Hart to win this game pretty damn handily. There wasn't anything super impressive about his play, except the splits in that final fight. And honestly, we didn't see anything super impressive from Scarlett this game. But that could just be because she was caught off guard by the build that Hart went for. Since, as I mentioned earlier, Scarlett never had an opportunity to check out the main base. So for all she knows, Hart has a single gas. He has both gas. Or maybe, well, Hart has to have at least one gas because he opened Reaper. But, yeah, like there's no way for her to know if that second gas is there. And that's one of the reasons why Scarlett maybe underreacted. So, it's tricky. I'd also like to point out that at this point in the game, she doesn't know if there's a third command center. If there's a third command center, Hart can't make this push, right? It just doesn't work. He'd have his command center. These barracks wouldn't have been building so many Marines. It's a really good job of Hart, I should also add, to deny the scouting of Scarlett, because Scarlett's not a bad player. If she knew what was happening, she would have been able to make better decisions, but perhaps she could have sacrificed an Overlord. She didn't want to sacrifice an Overlord, by the way. Like, yeah, she never sacrificed an Overlord until the Medivacs helped kill them. And even this one became an Overseer. So she never really gave herself a chance by getting the scouting information. But yeah, tough game for Scarlett. Let's see, what was game number 2? They did play on Merry-Go-Round, but I think they played on King Sejong Station first. Yeah, King Sejong Station was game 2. So we'll look at game number 2 now. We'll look at game number 2 now between Scarlett and Hart. This series overall was kind of ugly, mostly because Hart is really good at Terran versus Zerg. There's some things that your build order will never really be able to overcome, and that's your ability to control your units, your ability to micro, your ability to split Marines. And in Terran versus Zerg, being able to split your Marines is arguably the most important part of the game, right? You need to be able to split versus Storms, you need to be able to split versus Banelings, other beautiful things in life. So it's only giving me the option for sound disabled. That's really weird. It's actually really weird. Anyway, guess we broke it, guys. On this map, you can go a little bit further forward. So we'll say the only extra notes on that is 2 base, 5 racks, push, go YOLO. Alright, so I'm gonna actually save that notepad. This game it was another Reaper play, but I believe this was a 3 command center build. So we'll put this one into getting better at StarCraft. Hart WCS. Alright, so we'll say hell that push for Scarlett Overgrowth. Ballin'. Alright, let's make another notepad for this game. We can kind of talk about what allowed Hart to win this. So once again, this build is very standard. 10 depot, 12 racks, 12 gas, Reaper. Except this game, we see 2 Reapers this game. So why 2 Reapers, Nathan? Why 2 Reapers? What about 2 Reapers? What about 2 Reapers makes this build good versus a Zerg player, Nate? Well, the easy answer is that you have defense, right? Because if you go for the reactor, there's a possibility that an SCV can get picked off. Things weird can happen. So that's why you keep this one at home, because 2 pair of Zerglings like this can be very difficult to deal with. Scarlett did a lot of pool openings. Hyun also did a lot of pool openings. I would say that those builds put you behind if you're not able to actually get... If you're not actually able to put together a strong defense to like the Zerglings picking off your first few units, like that's really the only time a Terran player falls behind in the early game, when a Zerg does a build like this. So the Zergs can do it to defend against proxy plays and whatnot. It's just usually not something that'll pay off if a Terran plays defensively. So Nate, what else happened with this build? What changed? What changed? Because this looks pretty much the same, right? And I'm just kind of going through this a little bit quickly because we just went through in the last game a very similar opening. However, there is a difference. So this time around, just gonna pause this super quickly, right? So two Reapers, factory plus reactor on racks, and we'll say that we get our command centers, get CC while building. And difference, key difference from game 1 is no second gas, get 3rd CC when you can afford. Build Hellions and Tech Lab from racks. So we'll say you build the Hellions, you get Tech Lab on the barracks, build Starport as you would with aggressive push, switch onto Tech Lab for Banshee. So these notes should be taken in the context of the previous one, and maybe I'll tighten them up afterwards. But what Hart's done is a very standard Hellion Banshee opening. There's nothing really special about this build opening. The obvious power of the Banshee is that you can't be hit by any of these units on the ground. And Scarlett in this game, she wanted to go for a very aggressive Roach Baneling strategy. And there's a couple signs. First of all, she's taking out these rocks, and she's spreading creep on the right side earlier than spreading it on the left. Now, Hart, seeing, hey, why you have such a late third hatchery, this is something that as a Terran player should always tip you off. If you see that your opponent has such a late third, 7 minutes is not when you build a third hatchery. Usually you're going for this. Usually you're going for a third command center around this, a third hatchery around the 4, maybe latest 5 minute mark. You'll never get it after 6 minutes. Like, that's just, you're doing something aggressive if you get your third hatchery after 6 minutes. But 7 minutes is a really big tell. So Hart's like, well, you're doing something weird. He's going to finish his wall off. He uses his engineering base, mostly because it makes it more difficult to bust this with Banelings, right? If your opponent does a Baneling bust and they cancel your upgrades, it doesn't really negatively affect you because your opponent isn't getting upgrades anyway, right? All that matters is that you just defend, and then you can counterattack when the important upgrades are done, like Stim, when you get important things like Medivacs, right? Those are what really allow you to defend and get aggressive against an opponent that's trying to kill you with an early push like this. So the Baneliness starts up. Scarlett does all this. This Reaper runs by a bunch of roaches. Hart saw everything. He saw everything that he needed to see. And he even checks, he gets a confirmation. So what do you do at this point? You just throw in a couple of bunkers. That's it. And, you know, when we were casting this game, I wasn't entirely sure how this was going to work out for Scarlett. But the Baneliness finished so late. Like, there could have been Banelings already done as soon as the roaches shown up. But when you have to build the Banelings after the roaches are already here, this allows this Banshee, which already has 1 kill, to just keep getting kills. Like, just roaches alone can't break this wall. And that's a really big problem for Scarlett. So because of that, it also gives enough time for a few more units to pop out. It gives time for the SCVs to come repair. The SCVs weren't even in position the first time that Scarlett pushed up. And this Viking lands, and this Viking actually goes full Wings of Liberty. He sits here, he tanks a bunch of damage, and some of these units can't even squeeze through, which is quite nice for Hart. And yeah, the Viking will die, but you still have your Hellions, you still have a bunker. And these Banelings will come through. It's like, okay, they picked out some SCVs. Some of these run into the mineral line. The important part is that Hart still has his production, so he's building quite a few Marines. His Stim's about to finish up. And yeah, you lose workers, but with the third command center, Hart's income is still really good. Wait till you see what happens when these mules start mining. It's like, oh, Hart was behind in income. Now it's pretty close again, and he has triple SCV production, so he can recover quite nicely. Scarlett, meanwhile, has no tech. This is the advantage of going for a build order like this, because it just gives you so much power. And still having the Hellions alive obviously allows you to attack. You have 2 openings into your opponent's base now because she went out the back. There's just quite a few ways that you can get aggressive versus a Zerg once you defend against a push like that, right? So going beyond this, I'm not sure how much more there is to really talk about for this game. We can just fast forward through here and you'll see, if you're like, Nate, why aren't there build order notes on this? Well, I don't really know what to tell you, man. He's going to build tanks again, mostly because your opponent has Roach Bane. They don't have Mutalisks, so tanks are actually good versus that. But aside from that, you're just building Marines, man. You're just building Marines, getting upgrades, building SCVs. And because your opponent committed to such a big attack, there's not really a whole lot that Scarlett has, because her third hatchery, like I said early on, her third hatchery was very late, so she doesn't have the income necessary to build an army big enough to actually stop this push. And then Hart just pushes the front. And at this point, because there's not really a lot that Scarlett can do, I mean, the game ends, right? That's it. Loses the Roach Warren, the Baneling Nest. Is there really anything else that needs to be said? Personally, I don't think so. Scarlett's won 1 finishes, but Hart's already had his upgrades for a nice little time, drops the mules, and that's pretty much it. So it was a good, solid play by Hart, but most of this game came down to him scouting and reacting to the build that Scarlett went for. And I also believe that Scarlett's late Baneling Nest played a really heavy hand in how late her attack actually hit. If the Roaches move up that ramp at the very beginning, if the Roaches, the first time they step up the ramp, have those 8 Banelings with the Roaches, then I think Scarlett has a much better chance of breaking Hart. But even then, Hart's a really good player, and he's shown in his previous matches, especially in the WCS America round of 16 for Season 2, that he doesn't really lose to aggressive plays. He held on with just 3 SCVs, came back to actually beat Shigua on Frost. Definitely a game worth checking out. And that's just that's one of the things that makes Hart such a champion. Such a champion. Wow. What a champion. I'm going to go over the next game, and then we'll have a short break, and then we'll go into part 2, which will be Hart versus Hyun. And I am missing one of those replays because I didn't obs all of those games, but let's look at merry-go-round now. Hopefully you guys like the analysis. This is something that I'm going to be doing quite a bit of. There's a few more matches for me to go over, so there's gonna be quite a couple matches, and this will also be on YouTube. Thanks, of course, for all of you that tune in live, but also those of you that are gonna watch this on YouTube. So let's look at game number 3 of Hart versus Scarlett. Game number 3. Yeah, I said 3. I said 3. You know, using words is just something that I'm not really good at, right? So. Like I get paid to talk for it's funny when I'm like, man, you know, I actually get paid to speak and make jokes for a living about StarCraft. And then you try to talk to like a girl and you're just like, no man, suddenly all the funny bones in me have left. Well, maybe one. Okay, anyway, Scarlett this game does a very aggressive build, right? I don't know if we really care about that, because Hart wins this game for a reason unrelated to Scarlett's build order, mostly because he's pretty good at the game of StarCraft 2. So what is he doing this game? Nathan, it looks like it's just a Reaper expand again. Well, little Jimmy, you're pretty damn right in saying something like that. So, Hart doesn't do anything nuts this third game. When we look at the build overall that he goes for, it's a pretty in-between build. This build is a really, I wouldn't say as much of an in-between as it is a steal of Pult's build. Pult's Terran versus Zerg that he went for quite a bit was very middle of the road. You still don't have that third command center, but you do go for this early second barracks, which allows you to make a very quick stim push with medevacs. And that's one of the cool things about Pult's build orders, is that they usually exploit these weird tiny timings, usually get that Viking out early. But Hart's not doing anything too fancy. I actually loved this, like dancing around that watchtower, trying to kill the few Zerglings that Scarlett had there. Scarlett has her speed push, but Hart, I think seeing the Zerglings out on the map so early is what prompted Hart to make this bunker, which was really smart of him, because these Zerglings show up, and Scarlett can't really do anything against this. You're like, oh, Nate, did Hart do something imba? Did he abuse? No, Scarlett put herself very far behind with her opening. She built 16 lings are on the map right now. She lost 4. So that's what? 20 lings total. That's 10 larvae. That's 10 larvae that Scarlett put into Zerglings instead of drones. And you're like, Nathan, mules are OP because Hart has more income. Well, Hart has more SCVs because the way Terran works, right? Terran has really bad production, but the benefit is that Terran can actually make every unit that they want, right? Like if you have the production, you can be constantly building out of it. So he's up on workers naturally because Scarlett's build order puts her behind. And from this point onward, it is safe to say Hart has a lead. I'm sorry if that blows your mind, but if you're a Zerg player and you build a bunch of lings at the start of the game, you are behind if you don't actually kill anything. And Hart even puts like some fancy SCV micro. He does lose too, but you know, it still pans out pretty damn well for him. Like, it's not really like he has anything he needs to worry about because he's still building Hellions, he's going to build Marines, he's going to get Stim, and he starts his second gas. He does get a second barracks very soon, yeah. So it's like a 2-rack. This is very Pult-esque. Very, very Pult-esque because, like I said, you don't have the upgrades, you don't have the engineering base, you're on 2 barracks, you're getting a Viking. However, this build is great for being aggressive while also defending. If Scarlett wants to keep pushing with Zerglings, it's not really going to work because you have your Marines at home, you have some of your Hellions at home, and Hart doesn't run them into his opponent's base. He doesn't try to just run in and kill Scarlett early on. But the only other thing about this build that really sticks out is, once again, at this point in the game, if Hart can't do a good amount of damage with his attack, he's behind to the point where he probably can't win the game. Right? This one Zergling wants to be annoying and harass and scout for Scarlett, but you know, Hart just throws up a wall. He's not really concerned. Someone asked how Hart's style would fare against the way that Spinishiwa played versus me, which was, oh, you're attacking me, let me go for a counter base trade. Hart would have killed Spinishiwa before anything else happened because I go up to 3 bases. But like, you look at this drop, you just start to harass. This is so early, by the way. The standard time for a Terran player to push a Zerg and try to really bring heavy harass to them is 11 minutes. 10:30 is usually when the Terran leaves their base. They arrive at 11 minutes or 11:30. Scarlett at 9 minutes has nothing prepared to deal with this because A, she put herself behind with that early Zergling opening, and B, it's just too early for her to have a Spire. No one has a Spire. She started it, yeah, but nobody has their Mutalisks out without going for a 2-base play, which Hart is very acutely aware that she's not doing because, lo and behold, there's a 3rd base right here. We're looking at it, boys. Even a larva in midair. Look at these guys. They're like Ninja Turtles or something flying off of the hatchery. Anyway, my point is, Hart's build is solid, and he kind of knows what's going on, but he hasn't done crippling damage yet, right? He's only killed 4 drones. So why does Hart still win this game even though he's behind a base? Well, his splits are really, really good. I guess it's kind of a cop-out answer to say Hart's control is good because we always say Hart's control is good. But there are many Terrans that try to do what Hart does and they fail miserably. For example, yours truly. I don't even know what happened with that drop. He actually just targeted down every single Baneling. Like, he targeted every Baneling, and suddenly Scarlett can't do anything because she doesn't have her upgrades, right? There's combat shield done, medevacs are out, so the healing power makes these Marines very difficult to kill. And because there's still no Mutalisks out on the map, Hart can just dodge over to the next base. We see the Hellion still pressuring the left side, and anytime that Hart thinks he needs to retreat from a fight, he loads up into the medevacs and he runs away. This medevac's like, okay, I'm gonna leave. Okay, just send that one home now because there's nothing to put in it anyway. And then Hart just drops to the next base, and Scarlett constantly has to shift her attention, her focus around in order to try to defend against this. Now she's going to invest in static defense, and guess what? Hart has another push ready because he did not get a 3rd command center. He's able to invest in units. Like, this push off of a 3 command center build comes at about 14-15 minutes after that 11-minute push. Like, this is the 11-minute push still in action. In this game, it was an 8:30, 9-minute push. You do you see what I'm saying here? Because Hart plays 2 base, he gets everything out so much faster. It's just you need to do damage, which Hart has been able to do because of his control. And then this is a standard 15-minute push, maybe with a few less units because it's off 2 base, but it's still hitting at that time. And even though it's less, your opponent also has less to defend. Like that's really where I'm getting here. Because if this is your normal 11-minute push, this is actually pretty damn strong. 12 minutes, well, it kind of fits the bill. So Hart moving forward and being able to do all of this, it's just not possible for Scarlett to get everything ready because, like I said, Scarlett's opening put her significantly far behind, and Hart never gets hit by a Baneling. There's one Baneling with this. He focus fires it down, loses a single Marine to the Baneling, and now it's just Marines versus Zerglings. And I'll tell you what, Marines will win this fight every single time. Oh, there's more Banelings? Well, turns out Hart also knows how to split Marines too, so there you go. If you guys think Marine splitting is overpowered, then I guess Terran is OP, but the fact of the matter is not every Terran can do it as well as Hart, and that's why he won so many TvZs. Like, that's just beautiful control from him. And then, well, because that push required so much to be stopped, he can get the drop into the main base. Scarlett needs to build Zerglings and Banelings so much that she never actually gets a chance to build Mutas. I think she built 1 and lost it. Yeah, that's all. So that was just really great, smart play by Hart. And this son of a bitch has some really sick macro and control. So that's why we like Hart. That's why we like Hart. Hart's a cool guy. He's really good at what he does. Hopefully you guys are liking this analysis. I'm going to cut the VOD recording, and I'm going to start VOD recording part number 2 after the short commercial break. Stay tuned, guys. I'm going to be doing quite a few of these guides, analysis, and whatnot as much as I can. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Love y'all.